Banjo-Kazooie composer reiterates he has zero hopes for a new game in Rare's iconic platformer series, and besides, all you die-hard fans would instantly hate it. But of course, he'd be up for doing the soundtrack for a new Banjo game if it ever happened. So I did my video in regards to Banjo-Kazooie yesterday and the Moon Studio CEO coming out and stating that they believe that if Banjo-Kazooie were to have a new game, it would have the potential to rival up against Mario. And me personally, I kind of agree with that sentiment just because I feel like Banjo-Kazooie, though it's not the biggest, franchise in gaming history, I feel like it does have a good fan base, and it is one of those games that a lot of people have a lot of love for and nostalgia for. So seeing this information come out from the original composer, there is some things where I do kind of understand where they're coming from and everything like that. But at the same time, there is some of the stuff that he did state that I just personally don't necessarily agree with. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and get into it. We'll read the article here, check out where he's coming from, and then I'll give my thoughts as we go along. So, the Banjo Kazooie series has been dormant for over 16 years at this point, and composer Grant Kirkhope has zero hopes that's ever going to change, even though he'd be up for reprising his role if it did. And that's kind of one of the things I had mentioned in my video yesterday in regards to them potentially coming out with a new game. I stated in that video, and I'll reiterate that I feel like it is one of those things where if they are able to get the right people for either a sequel or a remake or a remaster, or not necessarily a remake or remaster, but like a reboot of this game, if they were to get the right individuals, I feel like it would have potential to do really well. And if the original composer was able to come back and do, a soundtrack similar to what we got in the first two games, Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, then yeah, I feel like definitely that would just add fuel to the fire to be able to make something, really good at that point as far as the game itself. And like I stated in my last video as well, that if they were able to actually bring some individuals back, let's say like the original developers that worked on the game the first time, either with Rare or if they just decided to bring them in, on their own kind of a thing, I feel like, yeah, there would be potential there as a, personally as a diehard fan to make something great that, someone like myself would actually really love and appreciate. So over on Twitter this week, Kirkhope, who composed the music for the first game, Banjo-Tooie and Nuts and Bolts, was asked if he'd be willing to create the soundtrack for a new Banjo game if it ever happened, to which the answer is a short but sweet, of course. Does that mean anything is actually happening though? According to the composer, seemingly not. And that is one of the unfortunate things, is that if he's kind of making statements like this, yeah, more than likely he hasn't heard anything, at least with them coming out with a new game. So the chances of that actually happening are probably very slim, which is, really unfortunate. So, writing again a few hours later, he says, I've said before, but I have zero hopes for another Banjo game. Plus, all you diehard fans would instantly hate it and slag it off no matter how good it was. It never works. And that's that's where I'm talking about, where I don't necessarily agree with them, where he makes that statement. Because I feel like if they were to come out with something that, was good, then yes, fans would be able to have that appreciation for it and be happy with what they got. Yeah, I understand in a sense kind of where he's coming from, where he feels like, oh, there's such a dedicated fan base, and no matter what you do, they're always going to have their criticisms. But I feel like that's with anything, you know what I mean? Not just video games, it could be like with movies or music or anything like that. But I feel like at this point, we've been so starved of anything Banjo Kazooie that if you do come out with something that's even just decent, not necessarily like mind blowing or like the best Banjo game ever, I feel like it would be something that fans would really be happy to see and actually be able to enjoy, especially if they were able to get stuff like the platforming back, as well as the music that this composer was actually able to create themselves. So that is one of the things where I don't necessarily agree with that statement that he made. So I've said it before, but I have zero hopes for another Banjo game. Plus, all you diehard fans would instantly hate it and slag it off no matter how good it was. It never works. And then this is the tweet right here. It's pretty much what I just read. The same thing that he had kind of mentioned, which I again I don't really agree with whatsoever. So he clarifies that he doesn't intend this statement to come across as mean. noting that the Banjo fanverse is a wonderful thing. The reaction when Banjo got into Smash Bros. Is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. However, his stance on the potential of a new game seemingly remains firm. Last year, after teasing something and quickly clarifying that it wasn't Banjo related, he told one fan who said, "Don't think I should expect any Banjo anymore," and they were correct. And that's one of the things too that kind of has me feeling like it really would have potential to go up against something like Mario was the fact that if at least from my personal experience, Banjo-Kazooie was really well received when it did come to Smash. And it's one of those things where I've mentioned it before in another Banjo video that I've done that when Banjo came to Smash Bros, I personally was hyped because I am a big Banjo-Kazooie fan. And it was one of those things where I had mentioned when it came down to me playing Super Smash Brothers, Link has always been my go-to. Usually Link, and then if I had to choose any others after that, it would probably be like Young Link, and then I mean for the most part just Young Link at that point. So pretty much those two are like the main ones that I'll usually play as. But once I seen Banjo-Kazooie was coming to Smash, that instantly made it so that I was like, well, I mean Link's definitely still going to be my main. That's always going to be the main character I'm always going to play as. But if Banjo-Kazooie is in next, that's more than likely gonna be number two for me. Just because I love that franchise so much, and I love the characters of Banjo-Kazooie. I feel like they're really funny characters to me, and just being able to go back to that nostalgia feeling of being able to play those games when I was really young is something I really enjoy because I had Banjo-Kazooie growing up. That was one of my games that I had, and I had a cousin that she had Banjo-Tooie. So I remember there was a point in my childhood where I would go over to their house and she would let me play, Banjo-Tooie on her game. And I got pretty close to beating the game itself. It's a long game for anyone that doesn't know. There's a lot of backtracking in that one. And even back then, like getting as close as I did was kind of a big deal. But I never got to actually finish the game when I was younger. Eventually, I did purchase it myself. I do own a copy of it now. So I was able to actually beat it. But yeah, it was one of those things where that just has like a lot of memory that I have from my childhood growing up and everything like that. So we'll go ahead and continue on. So despite Kirkhope's pessimism, Banjo hasn't been totally forgotten about in these last 16 years. As the composer mentioned, Banjo and Kazooie were added to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as DLC in 2019 and in 2023 when asked about the games that could eventually be revived. Xbox boss Phil Spencer even called out Rare's platformer by name. You've seen from our history that we hadn't touched every franchise that people would love for us to touch. Banjo fans, I hear you. He told Windows Central at the time, but it's true that when we find the right team and the right opportunity, I love going back to revisit stories and characters that we've seen previously. And that's really cool, the fact that, he was able to actually mention Banjo by name, because I feel like at that point there probably is a very big chance that he's probably heard a lot of stuff from a lot of individuals asking, hey, is there any ever going to be like a Banjo-Kazooie revival or anything like that. So the fact that he even mentioned it by name, in my opinion, I think is really cool. And it does shine a little bit of light in that darkness to fans out there of the Banjo franchise that, you never know. Maybe we still might have an opportunity to get something in the future, which I'm really hoping for. Could the iconic series ever make a proper return then? If Spencer's old comment is anything to go by, it doesn't seem totally off the table, but the series composer clearly doesn't want anyone getting their hopes up. And I mean, I understand where he's coming from, but again, I feel like there is a little bit of pessimism there that they do state like in this article, and I feel like there is some of the statement that he mentioned that I don't necessarily agree with, like I stated. But at this point, if he's kind of making comments like that, more than likely there is a reason for it, which is unfortunate in my opinion. So who knows? I mean, only time will tell at this point. We can only keep our hopes up to really see if we are going to get something, in the future, as far as, maybe like a sequel or a reboot or, a revamp of the series or the franchise or anything like that. So, I mean, I'm going to keep my hope. I'm not going to keep my hopes up, but I am going to have hope in general for it. So those are my thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Is there any Banjo-Kazooie fans that would really like to see something come to light when it comes down to this franchise? Like I said, either like a reboot or a remake or a sequel in general. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. If you guys could like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you guys have been watching this long, I really appreciate it. It means a lot. And yeah, until next time, Harmonic out. Peace.